Welcome to Life's Not Linear. Today I get to interview Nora. Nora, could you please give us an introduction and some of your background?
Sure. So currently I'm a water resources engineer for a consulting firm called Jacobs Engineering, and you can probably tell I have a speech impediment. I have been stuttering since I was maybe like 7 or 8, but we'll talk about that. So typically I work with drinking water clients, and so typically like water utilities, and for the last couple years I've been working on corrosion control projects, so a lot of stuff kind of connected to lead. But for the most part I've been putting together year-long studies where we take water pipes from the water system that have seen the drinking water for tons of time, like probably 20 years at least, and we try out new chemical treatment options to see what we can do to reduce lead release. And so far right now I think I have 4 projects on that, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else I do. I also kind of put together sampling plans for streams and lakes, and I do a little bit with water reuse, but those projects are typically in Colorado, California, Hawaii. So yeah, that's kind of where I currently am.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How did you get into the water space in general? I know that in Wisconsin we have like the fresh water and the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering like how you got into the space.
So I kind of just got tossed into it per chance, honestly. I am from Chicagoland, and I had originally applied to University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, to go into environmental sciences. And I realized once I had already turned in the application that, well, okay, perhaps I want to try something that's a little bit more technical. So I called and had them actually change my application to civil engineering.
Oh.
And luckily it was fine. And I went to school there, and then my freshman year of college, my brother Adam, he was a senior, and he was pre-med, and so he was working for a professor in a research lab, and he encouraged me to kind of seek out that same opportunity. So I found a professor. Her name was Helen Nguyen, and she was working on household scale filtration for communities in Guatemala. So it was part of like an Engineers Without Borders project, and I sent her an email over summer break, and she told me to come into her office, and we had a little talk, and that was pretty much it. For 2 years, I did really super boring work for her. And then eventually she pulled me into a new project where she was partnering with a nonprofit in Kathmandu to kind of conduct a similar study. So from there, I got really into water projects and microbiology, and I ended up doing a master's program with her to kind of continue some of that work.
Okay. Wow, that's
so it just kind of came, I don't know, it just one simple email turned into
like a career.
The rest of, yeah. Pretty much.
So taking like a step back before college,
yeah,
talking a bit about like high school and kind of just
sure.
If you want to talk about personal stuff, or if you want to talk about how you decided to go into engineering too, because that's a big leap.
Yeah. So as I said, I grew up in Chicagoland area. My mom's family is from Ohio, and my dad moved to the U.S. from Baghdad when he was in his late 20s. And so I think with him around too, there is a feeling of your parents, you know, sacrificing so much for you to have opportunity. So having straight A's was absolutely a priority in our household, which was, it was a little bit strict, but it's just kind of how it is when you hear about your parents growing up in a place where they don't have the same opportunity, and how hard they had to work to come here, and they don't want you to waste it. Yeah, so I remember I was taught long division in like first grade, because it was just like you know, had to learn math like as quickly as you could, and so I got pretty into like school as a whole environment. I really enjoyed it. And when I was 9 or around that, I don't know, it was like 4th grade, I started having a hard time hard time talking, and I would find myself pretending to forget words and choosing to not say certain words because I would get stuck. And so my parents have kind of tried to correct it, but it just like did not work. And it got to a point where I had pretty much stopped talking because it was just like too hard and so embarrassing to not be able to say your own name, you know? And I think at that point, my parents took me to see a speech therapist. And she was like incredible. She, so if you ever are trying to find one, her name is Kristen Camilla. And her approach was, okay, you have this problem, but how come it's a problem? Like, why are you framing it that way? And is that the truth, or is that the story you're telling yourself? And so even though like we practiced speech tools and all that stuff, it was a lot more about trying to accept your circumstances and powering on, because I think in a lot of ways people can relate to that self-perception that like your own struggle is like terrible, and oh my God, it's going to stop me from ever achieving, you know, what I want. And when you kind of start to see that every person on the planet has that issue, it's a lot easier.
Yeah. No,
But
brought that up. It's the perception. Because actually, the person I interviewed yesterday, she was talking about like neurodiversity, and she was saying that like at age 25, she was diagnosed with ADHD, and then just recently realized she was dyslexic. And she was saying that, you know, our workplaces are meant, like, she was like, why is it viewed as a disability? Because our workplaces make it so that it disables me. But if our workplaces were an environment that it empowered me instead, then it wouldn't be a disability, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we live in a world where efficiency is priority, and it's hard to like to navigate, you know, like how do we create the environment in which we want to work. our company, we have this culture phrase, and it's bring your whole self to work. And the concept is, you know, we are like taught when we're transitioning, especially from college to our professional life, what is acceptable as professional. And I've been super grateful to see how that perception, especially in our company, how that's changing, and how people are starting to understand that you can't just drop your personal problems, your mental health, your race, your religion at the front door. All that stuff is just constantly on you, and that's just how it is. I mean, that is the reality. And I think the more that workplaces can understand that and provide flexibility around it, the more that people will want to stay in that company because they feel authentic.
I agree. I like that phrase, the bring your whole self to work, because
yeah,
definitely, like you said, you can't just drop it at the front door. That'd be easy.
You can't. It'd be great if you could, but that's just like not gonna happen.
When you're like ready, yeah, it's not gonna happen. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
your experiences, and then translating, or I guess as you got older, so you said you were maybe like 9 or 14.
Yeah.
How have
Sure.
you been able to kind of like shift your perspective, and I know, and we'll get into it, but I know you've done a lot of amazing things, like, so I'm just wondering how, and I would love for other students who maybe struggle with like similar things to see that, like you said, it's not like a disability, or it's not, you know, it's just your perception of it.
Sure. I mean, it's an ongoing process. Like, it is a constant figuring out of, you know, how to handle it literally every day. I mean, I have to give presentations, I have to talk to clients, I have to make phone calls, and at this point I've just gotten so used to telling people, oh, I have a stutter, and people are okay with it. That doesn't really change the pressure or change the fear that is like always there, right? I don't really understand the concept of like overcoming just a disability, because it's always there, and you have to choose to confront it every day. And some days you can do that, some days not so much. And so I don't know, I think the best way that I've come to kind of to to manage it is by being super honest about what's happening, telling people up front, hey, I have this part of me of how I talk, and what I have to say is still important, and I want you to wait. And people are usually pretty awesome, you know. But it's interesting. I was talking to a friend recently. There was an episode of This American Life, and one of the components of it was a guy. His name was Jerome something, but he was performing on stage, and he stutters, and he's talking about it in this concept of temporal accessibility. So he's performing in an event where participants have a time constraint of two minutes, or to perform their piece. And 2 minutes for him, or for me, isn't the same as 2 minutes for someone else who can speak fluently. And so it's like his concept that kind of goes back to what your friend was talking about, in terms of having an environment where the accessibility is completely there. And I think what it comes down to is saying it in a way where you're just being honest, and like saying, I need more time, or I need my environment to work like this, because how it works for everyone else isn't how it works for me. And kind of coming to terms with what you need to be productive is super key. Yeah.
I like the example that you gave of like, you have 2 minutes to pitch this, because I just so many different like pitch competitions or events I've been to where they're like, okay, you guys have 2 minutes, or even like in senior design where they're like, we're gonna cut you off at 9 minutes. I'm gonna hold the 1 minute marker, and I'm like, damn, that's like really not fair.
Yeah, no. I just immediately am like, hey, just so you know, I'm gonna go over.
Yeah,
and I'm just gonna go over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to touch a bit on what you've done outside of your like water resources.
Sure.
Maybe like your work in the community and whatnot as well. And
Yeah. So, gosh, weirdly enough, it all kind of connects to like stuttering and all kinds of stuff. I don't know. It's just strange. But so I started working for CH2M Hill, which was acquired then by Jacobs. And when you when you're an entry level or junior engineer, you don't have a ton of opportunity to take control of a project or have like a lot of responsibility. And so, this was around the time when the March for Science was kind of cropping up, and I had moved to Milwaukee in July of 2016, and the March for Science, like around the country, were kind of popping up in January. And so I was like hoping that one would crop up here. And while I'm here, I'm just gonna check my battery life real quick. Okay, we're good. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like see one, and I was kind of just like, okay, come on.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was in conservation at the Milwaukee County Zoo. And so she and I were kind of like, well, okay, like we're just gonna create one then. And so we started a Facebook group, and it really just exploded. And I didn't know anything about trying to start a nonprofit and so we coordinated the logistics. Like we probably had 100 people in a team, and all of those team members helped with the permitting, the planning, the branding, all the content for the Milwaukee March for Science. And so the march was in April 2017, and we had about 3,000 people come out, and it was awesome. It was like crazy exciting. And we had, a sum of like money that was left over afterwards. And about 10 of us from the original organizing crew, we decided to kind of create a science advocacy organization. And so that's kind of how Milwaukee area science advocates kind of came about. And this was a time when I was saying yes to everything, like everything I possibly could. I was like, yes, I'm gonna do that. Yes, I'm gonna do that. Yes, just too much stuff. I was absolutely destroying my stamina to the point where I was just like exhausted. But all this stuff was super fun, and at the same time, it provided such an opportunity to like connect to people in the community. And it also provided like a way for me to kind of see how I could be a professional with a stutter. I mean, I had to talk to crowds constantly, and you have no option. You just have to do it. And so I got really comfortable in that kind of environment, and it kind of took away any excuse I had to not keep pushing. And so I was the president of the organization for a little over 2 years, and we did a lot of cool stuff. Like we had, and it's still currently going on, but we partnered with a local women's shelter to do a garden and kind of incorporate workshops on gardening and water science, kind of all in that. We kind of did these science socials where we would have, you know, people in the community who were either scientists or science enthusiasts kind of come out and have a drink and like hang out and talk about stuff. What else did we do? Oh, we had a science after school program at the Silver Spring Community Center, and we also had a couple of events that were a little bit more like educational in terms of trying to present information on like lead pipes in Milwaukee, how lead works and how exposure happens, and then of course the event that you were featured in, where we recognized 10 women who are science professionals in the Milwaukee area. And so all this kind of like these cool events, projects, programs that really kind of created a team and a cohesive concept in connecting the community to more science programming. And it was a truly awesome experience that was so rewarding when talking to people in the community. And after about a little over two years, I handed off the torch, and so I know that some of those programs are still going on, and so that feels good. But it also taught me a lot in saying yes and saying no, and having a good understanding of what kind of time you actually have in 24 hours. And yeah, it was a time in my life where I could like give so much, and the reward was incredible. And then afterwards I was like, I am really tired, I need a break. and I took it, which is really, you know, it's like helpful to be able to see when it's time to step back.
Yeah, I think that's super important. um, that's amazing that like seems like shortly after you moved to Milwaukee, you're like, okay, let's make this happen. Like the March for Science, and that's such a quick turnaround. And now you have this Milwaukee Science like advocacy group that I don't. We need that.
Yeah.
With, women, but especially just with like our younger students, like grade school, middle school, high school. I think science can be very intimidating. So having somebody to
For
like
sure.
bridge that barrier, just show them that it's not as scary as it looks, or it is, but it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just like realizing that excuse me, that like it doesn't have to be, or science does not have to be so uptight.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that, and I mean, for people who go to college and are in science programs, they're extremely hard. And it really takes it out of you to even just go through the program. I mean, that on its own is a huge accomplishment. And I think that sometimes we have the impression that you have to be a certain kind of person to go into science. And I think that's starting to change, but I think that it's a slow process. And I can even see it in the engineering industry, where, as a woman, you're kind of expected to be a certain kind of like woman. And when you come in with like a lot of personality, they're kind of like, whoa, who are you? Yeah. I mean, there have been plenty of times where I have been assumed to be the team member that is either in PR or in HR or in, all of these kinds of communications. And I'm just like, no, I'm not. But yeah. And so you can really surprise people. And I think that kind of shock is starting to wear off, which is really, really nice. Like, in my first year on the job, I had to put together this analysis of showing a water client what their water flows at their wastewater treatment plant would look like for the next 5 or 6 years if they changed their process, and how would that kind of coincide with their compliance. And like I had to give this presentation to a conference room of six male engineers, two male lawyers, and four male wastewater operators. And they had a ton of questions, and they were totally engaged, and there was clearly, there was no point in time where they hesitated on, I don't really trust you. It was clear that from the beginning of our conversation and this presentation, they were like, okay, yeah, we completely trust you. And I was like, whoa, really? Which was awesome.
Yeah.
So it's starting to get there, but you know, it's hard to. It's intimidating.
It's 2020 and we're still like, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, progress is better than nothing. So
it is.
That's a lot of male figures with big educations in one room.
Yeah, I was like, okay, here I go.
Like sharing your experiences and also telling us about, I really like that you highlighted that there was time in your life that you said yes a lot, but also learning to say no to things too.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a balance that I'm trying to strive for, and I don't think a lot of people get it, because I totally agree. Like, say yes to things that you wouldn't usually say yes to, because you never know what's
gonna you don't know.
But also, it's like you also don't know what's gonna happen for you personally when you just say no and like take time for yourself. So I think that's something, especially in the like entrepreneurial community, I think not a lot of people get what, like, why you would say no. And
sure.
sometimes I feel like judgment for that, but also like,
yeah,
if I'm burnt out, I can't be my fullest self. So
yeah, and I think part of it too is kind of accepting that you don't know what can happen. I mean, like, all in the midst of, I think I was in, let's see, Massa at that point was like a year and a half old, or like a little, like close to 2 years old. And I had a person close to me take their life. And literally my world stopped completely and just crashed. And all of these opportunities that I had said yes to and had commitments and people who were relying on me, I was just like, I can't do it. And I have to just shut down for a little while. And I think that that's okay. Like, projects and careers and all of your goals, they have to be a little bit dynamic, and they have to be able to change with what life throws at you, because things aren't going to turn out how you expect. And you can plan everything perfectly, and it doesn't always matter. So it's good to be prepared, but at the same time, some things are just going to explode. And that is part of the fun in a lot of ways. Yeah. I mean, it just kind of is. You're like, well, that happened. What do we do now?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear about your friend that was close to you. But I'm glad that you were able to be like, all right, retract a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes a crazy thing crazy thing happens and you have to just completely reorganize. And it isn't super easy to accept that, because especially, you know, and I know that you can commiserate because you are extremely active, but it's hard to tell people no, and it's hard to feel like people have trusted you to complete something, and then all of a sudden you can't do it. And that's where you learn a little bit about saying yes with qualifiers. Yes, I can, but also these things are kind of happening. So I could be slow on this, or I could need this. Mm-hmm. And so I think it all kind of goes back to like what we were talking about, and just trying to be honest about what is happening for you with people that you're committing to, whether that is professional or something extra. And you know, it's a mystery all the time.
I love that you said that. Thank you for like the saying yes with qualifiers.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's not really talked about, and it's something that I've been like doing, and I think it disappoints some people, but to me,
totally.
It allows me to still be able to give and do these things while also not taking from myself.
Right. Yeah. I've gotten used to doing it a lot with like friends, where if a person wants to, you know, hang out, I'm like, yeah, I can probably hang out. I have a feeling that I might be tired, like I'm trying to wrap up a project, and it's possible that I'm going to want to hang out, but let's just say maybe.
Yeah.
And it can be scary to just be like, maybe I want to hang out with you. I don't know yet. But it isn't about who that person is. It's just, you know, trying to take care of your future self, where you're like, oh, I don't want to hang out right now, I'm so tired and I don't have anything left. And then just like trying to take care of that future problem, so that way it isn't a problem. And you can just say, hey, we had already talked about that there was a possibility I would be feeling like I needed alone time. And that's true. So let's hang out again later.
Thank you so much, Nora, for, you know, giving your time today. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It was great to hear just like what you learned from your experiences, and I love to hear the balance of like the saying yes and the saying no and the qualifiers and everything. So thank you for sharing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.